What can human beings perceive in this vast universe? In this presentation, I'm going to look at three perceptions that human beings possess. First is the visual perception, where we can see part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The second is audio perception, where we can hear vibrations as sound. And thirdly, the perception of heat energy through temperature. So we'll start with the visual perception. We can see some of the electromagnetic spectrum, but the spectrum is actually huge. It contains cosmic rays, gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, infrared light, microwaves, radar, radio, television, GPS, etc., etc. Our perception, though, is only a tiny sliver of this spectrum, from around 400 to 700 nanometers. That's all we can see in this entire spectrum. So in the audio range, there are various different sections. You've got the infrasonics, which is down at the low end of the vibration spectrum, the acoustic range, which we can hear as human beings, and then above around about 20 kilohertz, you've got ultrasonics. So at 20 hertz, that's the kind of the bottom end of the range that we can hear as humans. That's where you get all the bass notes. When you get up to about 20 kilohertz, that's the top end of the range that we can hear. Some animals can hear above that, bats for example. Then you get up to a little bit higher than that, you get into medical and destructive ultrasonic equipment. And then when you get to the top end of that, above 2 or 3 megahertz, you're then getting into diagnostic equipment and NDE type equipment. Human beings can hear typically in the range 20 to 20,000 hertz or thereabouts. So let's look at temperature. Temperature is essentially a measurement of the vibrational energy in a system, which is the equivalent to the thermal energy. When that vibrational energy drops to zero, we say that the object has reached a temperature of absolute zero, which is 0 Kelvin. This is equivalent to minus 273.15 Celsius. At that point, all vibration stops in the object. The coldest temperature recorded on the planet Earth was in August 2010, when a temperature of minus 93 Celsius was measured in Antarctica. That's pretty cold, but nowhere near absolute zero. The coldest place where people live on the planet routinely is in a Russian place called Oymyakon, I think. And they reckon it goes down to about minus 46 degrees Celsius in January there. Make sure you've got your winter woolies if you're ever going to go there. So human beings, right, okay, well, the lowest recorded body temperature in a person who survived was this lady, Anna Bagenholm, in 1999, and she apparently, her body temperature went down to around 13.7 Celsius. That's pretty cold, and yet she managed to survive. Lucky lady. The typical body temperature for a human being is somewhere in the region of about 37 degrees Celsius. That's your core temperature. And then this chap, Willie Jones, he supposedly went up to around about 46.5 Celsius and survived, which is pretty hot. He's a lucky chap to have survived that. Human body cannot really survive these sort of core temperatures for too long. Then we look at the hottest recorded surface temperature on the planet, and this was in the Lut Desert in Iran, and that went up to 71 degrees Celsius. That's pretty toasty. But then look at this. You've got a star with a funky name, funky star. This was a brown dwarf star in the Lyra constellation, and its surface temperature is only 25 degrees Celsius, which means you can actually touch it. There you go. There's a star you can touch the surface of, and it won't singe your fingers. Whereas the maximum measured temperature on the surface of Venus is around about 462 degrees Celsius. Venus is the hottest planet in the solar system because of the greenhouse effect. It's covered in a very, very thick layer of clouds, which traps all the heat that it receives from the sun. The heat can't escape, so the surface gets extremely hot. Venus is often referred to as the sister planet of Earth. The sun itself, the surface of the sun can reach around about 5,500 degrees, which is pretty cold compared to the core of the sun, which can reach millions of degrees. So what's the hottest temperature in the universe? Well, there is a temperature known as the Planck temperature, which is this number here. It's 142 followed by 30 zeros. It's very, very hot, as you can imagine, and according to modern day physics, anything that gets hotter than that will no longer comply with our standard laws of physics. So you don't want to be hanging about there for too long. Okay, so now we know roughly the sort of ranges that are available out there in the universe. What can human beings tolerate? Well, in the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the stuff that we see as light, we can see between 400 and 700 nanometers typically. Most people that is. In the sound frequency range, most people can hear somewhere between 20 up to 20,000 hertz. Although that does change as you get older, and your top end frequencies start to drop significantly. And then the temperature range, which your core temperature can tolerate, is only between around 24 to 44 degrees. If you go outside those sort of temperatures, then you're not going to last for very long at all. So let's stick all this information into a nice little three-dimensional graph and see what we can perceive and tolerate. So if we have three different axes where you've got the sound frequencies up in the z-axis, the electromagnetic spectrum in the x-axis, and temperature in the y-axis, then you can see here that the little red arrows show how much of that frequency range we can hear in sound. That little red arrow shows you how much of the electromagnetic spectrum we can see, and then that little arrow can show you how much temperature the body can tolerate. So let's put these all together and we come up with this little cube, this little area, and this represents the total human perception of the entire universe that us human beings can see and tolerate. As you can see, it's a tiny fraction of the whole universe. So this presentation it was designed just to give you an idea of the tiny fraction of the universe that we as human beings can perceive. Really, we are extremely limited in our perceptions and our tolerances. There's so much more going on in the universe that just completely passes us by, and we have zero awareness of. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into all that stuff. You can find more information and bits and pieces on our blogs and on our YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening.